Hi, everybody. I'm Elaine Ubiña from Fairfield County Look, and delighted to have you all here with us for Marriage and Co-Parenting with Tracy Fox, who is a fantastic life coach. I talk to her very often. She has helped me in a lot of ways with marriage, with general life, and kids, et cetera, et cetera. So there's my plug. And then I want to introduce you to our moderator, Dimitra Ganius, who is fabulous and has become a wonderful partner in our business, in our Look video business, and as well as many other things in the Look world. Dimitra has a podcast called Get Louder, so you guys have got to listen to that. And she is also a coach as for public speaking, and I think I need another class. But anyway, Dimitra is fantastic, and I'm going to pass it over to Dimitra. And I am going to say that Tracy has offered, we're going to put everybody's name in a hat after the talk, and we will contact you. The winner gets a half-hour session with Tracy Fox. So we're thrilled. Thank you, and I'll let you take it from here, Dimitra.
Elaine, you're amazing. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. And today we're together because we want to find solutions to upcoming problems. And when we're prepared, we have so much more success down the line. So we're talking today to Tracy Fox, who literally wrote the book on being happy. In fact, several of them. And today we're focusing on marriage and co-parenting. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Dimitra. Hi, everyone.
Can't wait to hear from you today. And there are so many different perspectives here. It's the marriage and the co-parenting. And not only do we have all of Tracy's expertise from her books, but she has an amazing podcast of her own, of course, named the Happy Self Podcast, building on her brand. It is such a special way to connect with Tracy on a very scheduled time. So we get to hear from you. Love all of what you're sharing and all of the content. We need you, Tracy.
Thank you.
So today we're talking about marriage because we're heading into the holidays, and believe it or not, it is not actually always the most wonderful time of the year. So get us in the right mind frame, Tracy, so we can succeed in these coming weeks.
Well, I think the mind frame is that everything is about being intentional. And I always, when I talk about marriage and getting in the right frame of mind in terms of family and marriage and parenting, you sort of do want to go back to when you first got married and think about the words you used, and whether it was in a ceremony or whether it was in a town hall, we all talked about honoring and cherishing and loving. And I think if we just focus on those three words as we go into the holiday season and are spending all this time with our family, and you really elevate your own behavior to honoring, loving, and cherishing, I think we're going to have a much better time.
I love that. Okay, thank you for laying the groundwork. And remember that if you have any questions, I am monitoring the chat box. And of course, we will jump in and answer anything that you have to share. So I want to stick to this theme that you began, Tracy, esteeming our marriage above all else. That is the first rule that you share in your book. How do we keep our marriage elevated and sacred when we're so busy and we're running around, we have work, we have kids, so many distractions?
Well, one of the things I talk about, and it's in the book, I do a 10-step solution, but one of the things I talk about is everything goes back to how you identify it. And I give the example in the book about a book, which is if I come over to your house and I drop off an old dusty book, you're going to, with your husband, look at it and sort of be like, why did Tracy drop this off? Sort of a joke. And what are you going to do with an old dusty book? You're going to throw it away. You're going to put it up in the attic. But if I call you up and say, no, look a little more closely, and you open it and it's a first edition Hemingway, all of a sudden you're going to treat that book very differently. You're going to put it out on the mantle with pride. You're going to tell all your friends you have a first edition Hemingway. You're going to make sure it's loved and honored and taken care of. And so I say, do the same thing with your marriage. That's what esteeming a marriage is. It's saying, with your partner, this is the most important thing. And whatever you prioritize, you take care of in this world. So I say identify your marriage as the most important thing, and then everything else does follow from that, even with busy times and hectic schedules.
I love the meaning behind that, because even though marriage might be common and many people are married, it is rare to have something that we really focus on above everything else.
Well, that, and I also want to say, be careful what you say about your marriage, both to yourself, with your partner, and to your friends, because what I have found is over the years, what happens is people start to downgrade their marriage, either with each other. They're like, oh, I'm so tired of this, or this is exhausting, it's too much work, or they're out with their girlfriends and they'll say, oh, my husband's annoying, or the guys are out playing golf and say, oh, my wife doesn't stop talking, or everybody starts to chip away at the fabric of marriage. And I do think you need to make a deal with yourself and with the person you love most in the world to say, let's not do that. Let's really esteem the marriage and treat it, again, like it's the most important thing, both in terms of how we think about it, but also, of course, in how we behave towards it.
And that takes us to number 2, which is a marital mission statement. This thought blows my mind because it's really about getting to the core. It's you and me in writing. So tell us about how we build this mission statement.
Well, I say, like every CEO in the world knows this, that you don't have a company without having a mission statement, because you want everybody in the company on the same board working towards the same goals. And so if you do it with your marriage, then you're going to set everybody, including the kids potentially, also up for success. And so if you sit down, what I suggest, and I did the book, I don't know if this was made clear, as 2 workbooks. So there's a happy marriage for her and a happy marriage for him. And each workbook, you fill out the answers and then you come together and brainstorm. And so the chapter on this, you would actually write out your mission statement, your husband would do the same thing, and then together you would combine them. And so everybody's mission is what it is. It might be, in our home, we want to have a sanctuary, we want to make money, we want to have fun, we want to make sure that we're good parents together, we want to make sure we go on a lot of vacations. It really doesn't matter what your mission statement is. What matters is that you two agree what it is, and then maybe put it out somewhere special so that, again, you remind yourself regularly of why the marriage is so important and the values and goals you have for your marriage.
This takes me back to one of the best things you have ever told me, which is marriage is 1 + 1 = 1. And I love the idea that no matter how much you respect yourself, you're going to still end up as part of something bigger, but you're still one unit. You're not adding it up.
Well, let me explain that formula even better, and you did a great job of it. But the reason I do it that way is because I say, if you're sort of a half person and you marry another half person, meaning I'm broken and you're sort of broken and we're hoping that we'll complete each other and make a whole person, that formula doesn't work in marriage. But neither does, oh, I'm over here by myself, you're over there, maybe we'll have dinner on occasion and raise these kids, and 1 + 1 = 2. That formula doesn't work in marriage. The only formula that works is, I'm going to try to be the best version of myself. You work on being the best version of yourself, but then together we support each other in that. So that if I have an anger problem, then you're not just pointing your finger at me saying, well, what's wrong with you? Get your act together. You're going to come alongside and say, I see how you're struggling. How can I help you and support you and benefit you? And vice versa. If my husband has a issue with spending too much money, I might come alongside and say, okay, let me help you sit down and we'll work out the finances. We have to support each other. 1 + 1 = 1, exactly as you said.
I love this notion, and I'm wondering how it carries over to co-parents, because I think the beauty of being divorced, for those who are so happy to be on this new journey by themselves, how do you sort of keep that mission of the kids at the center? Because it seems as though everyone is allowed to do whatever they want, but you still need to be working on the same path somehow.
Well, again, I always say happy marriage or happy divorce. I mean, why would you choose anything else? And everything goes back to being intentional. If you want to have a really successful divorce, then you say to your spouse, look, we've done this thing, but that doesn't mean that we can't rise above, be really good friends, again, support each other, and have regular meetings on how we want to co-parent. And what happens in so many marriages, and probably is even worse in so many divorces, is you start focusing on the problems, who's right, who's wrong, and then you're into a competition and a battle. And it's never good to focus on the problems in either of those scenarios. What you want to focus on is where can we find common ground? And there is nothing more important than co-parenting. I mean, that's the thing you have in a divorce situation. That is what grounds you together for the rest of your life. You want your kids to be successful. And so why wouldn't you say, let's put, the pride and the ego aside, let's meet regularly and let's come up with some strategies of how we agree, no matter what household they're in, that there's consistency, because kids always benefit from consistency. So if it's 9 o'clock bedtime in my house, can we agree that it's 9 o'clock bedtime in your house? And if we can't agree, well, you think it should be 10, I think it should be 8, can we then get to a common ground of 9 o'clock? So we're all clever people. We can brainstorm and we can figure it out for the sake of our beautiful children, for sure.
I want to throw a question to you from one of the viewers. What if you have zero support from your ex-spouse on any level? I'm sure that means emotional, financial. How does one begin to function and be a good parent and feel like a whole person when there's no other support there?
Well, I would say 2 things. One is, always see the other person for who they are. So if you're not getting support, right, I wouldn't keep going down the line of having this expectation, because that sets you up for disappointment and discouragement. So see the other person for who they are. And I don't mean from a fighting point of view, like, oh, they're a loser and they're not giving me any support. I mean from a Mother Teresa level of, for whatever reason, they can't give support. And yes, it's hurtful. And yes, I'm disappointed. However, I want to teach my kids that I can do this. And I want to teach myself that I can do this. And so then you're going to have to reach out for other resources. And there are a lot of them. There are divorce support groups. There are coaches. There are friends. And so what I would do is, again, not go to an empty well. And if the ex-spouse is an empty well, you will never get water from an empty well. So don't keep going back there, because that can really feel discouraging.
Let me ask you quickly, what is it that you have found in all of your time, your expertise working with couples? What do men and women want? I mean, it might sound very old-fashioned to say, how can I please the other person and make them feel good? And I don't know, maybe it's welcoming them at the door. Tell me what works to make others feel good.
Okay, so you mentioned the most important one, and I do always laugh about that one with men, and I coach a lot of men, and you would think the main thing for men would be sex. I mean, that's just a joke that they would like to have sex. But when men tell me their number one desire, it is that someone notices them and cherishes them when they come home from a day at the job, or even, coming around the corner from a home office. They want to be noticed, and they want to be cherished for their part in the family unit. And what they say a lot is, Tracy, I married this sort of sweet, lovely bride, and now I feel like I'm married to my angry mother. She's always mad at me. I can never do anything right. When I walk in, I get the hand like I'm busy, don't talk to me. And I'm not saying that goes on in every household, but it goes on enough that men have mentioned it to me. And I do think if you can just stop what you're doing, get out of your chair and say, hey, welcome home, and have a minute. Men tell me that is the most important thing. And quite honestly, it's such a simple thing. I do think we as wives could do that. In terms of okay. And what women want most is a safe place to fall. I hear this all the time, that women want understanding. What they do not want, and that's why that book was written, right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. I don't know if anyone remembers that book. But right, women just want to be heard. We don't want the fix. So if I come home and I say, gosh, someone was mean to me today on the tennis court or at my job, I just want to talk and have my husband go, oh yeah, that's terrible. You poor thing. Can I get you a drink or whatever? I don't want him to start to give me a list of how I can fix it. And that is across the board with women. Not every woman, of course, but most women just really want to be heard. They want someone to empathize with them. And that's a simple thing for men to do, because all you have to do is sort of mirror back what they're saying with some level of support. And it really does work. So meeting and greeting men when they come in, and for women, it's deep understanding.
It's a little bit of putting our ego aside in each of those scenarios, right? Just try and put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Well, I think that, in any relationship, I think humility is the name of the game. If you want healing and you want to have a good relationship, humility is the way to go, not pride, ever. Because again, once you start down the path of I'm right, it's my way, you are making the person you love most in the world, supposedly, if that's your supposed, feel bad. Why would you want to do that? It doesn't even make any sense. And same thing with parenting. Why would you ever make your child feel bad? It just doesn't make sense. You want to be an encourager, not a scolder when you're parenting.
I love that you give us a very direct order when it comes to communication. Don't let it linger. You suggest a weekly meeting. What is so successful about that weekly time frame that you say works in order to share what's going right and what's going wrong?
So I'm a big believer that this is the key to a happy marriage, a weekly meeting where you discuss sort of the workings of the marriage. Because if you do not discuss the workings of the marriage, how you're, I say there's 4 things that should happen in the weekly meeting. One should be, you should go over the to-do list, which is someone's got to clean out the garage, somebody's got to mow the lawn, somebody's got to take out the garbage. And you look at those things and you divide and conquer. The second thing is money has to be discussed, because if you're not on the same page about money, it's the number 1 reason people do get divorced. The third thing is parenting. Do we want to spend our money on education? Do we think they should go to public school, private school? All those things have to be discussed. And the last thing is romance. And romance/fun. How are we doing? Are we spending any time together? Are we ever going on a date night? Do we have any intimacy in the marriage? And the reason it has to be weekly is because if you do not meet weekly, what happens is what I call drive-by shootings, which is I'm on the couch, my husband walks in, I thought you were going to unload the dishwasher. Then you start this bang, bang, bang at each other. And then I say something to him and we're passing each other all the time, but we're never really communicating. Whereas if you sit in a weekly meeting on a Sunday and he says, look, you take care of the dishwasher this week, I'll unload the, garage. Then let's say none of it happens. You hold your stuff until the next Sunday and then you brainstorm again. Like, yeah, I know I said I'd do the dishwasher, but quite honestly, I don't have time. So what else can we do about that? You're working together like adults trying to figure things out as opposed to constantly being at each other, which again, you want to chip away at a marriage, you can chip away at it by just being nasty, which happens in a lot of marriages throughout the week with the little side comments. It's not good.
If it stew in your resentment, then certainly it's going to boil over. We can picture that.
Absolutely.
Giving each other the finger behind the back or maybe to their face. Who knows what's brewing?
Yeah, all of it.
So tell me about how this communication works, though, for those who are co-parenting, because you may not see them. Is it a matter of a phone call, an email? Do you think talking it out is best, or just putting it in writing if you're not on the best of terms? How would you suggest communicating all of the important things that need to be said and shared if the situation is not quite copacetic?
Well, I would say 2 things. I really believe no matter how bad things get, there's always a way to get back to healing. And I know people who are in enemy territory don't necessarily believe that, but it's true. Hatfields and McCoys or the Middle East peace crisis, whatever it is, there's always a way to find common ground. And I do think if you want to be the one to step forward and try to be the healer, because what happens is when somebody hurts us, we all go running back to our corners, and then, once again, communication dissolves. So I would say the first thing is try as you may to see if you guys can decide that there's this sacred place where you're going to discuss the children and the workings of all of that stuff for the sake of the children. And I do think both parents can agree that they want their children to do well in the world. And so often people will elevate their ability to get along when it comes to the children. And then in terms of how to do it, I mean, if you can get somebody to do a Zoom or to meet at a coffee shop or whatever, I do always think face-to-face is better. But if things are so bad you can't do that, then sure, email. The problem with email and text, though, of course, is it gives people more license to kind of say what they want and maybe dissolve into saying things that they wouldn't necessarily say in person. So I think if you can do it in person, it's much better. Absolutely.
No hiding.
Right.
I want to ask about money because you mentioned it in the married couples who need to sit down and really talk it out, be on the same page about it. What about in a divorced couple when the financial situations are very different? And this time of year, that money translates to what children perceive as love. What if one parent is giving tons of gifts and one parent just simply doesn't have the ability to do that? How do you explain to your kids And how do you explain to each other how difficult a position that puts you in if money is not equitable?
Well, I mean, again, everything I think goes back to teaching, and we all have the ability to teach our children well. And so if you're the parent, let's say, that doesn't have as much money, maybe you sit with your kids and say, look, let's take a realistic look at what's going on here and explain that, you know, it's nice to get gifts, but that's not always the way that we translate love. And so this year, I mean, I even actually did it this year with my own kids, and I'm not divorced or anything, but I said, this is not the year that I just want to be spending a lot of money. With coronavirus and everything that's going on, I just want to simplify, simplify, simplify. And we just changed up our whole Christmas, and we're going to make it about just doing something charitable and then doing something athletic. You know, we're going to play some paddle and we're going to do some other stuff. And we're not going to do a whole huge Christmas with gifts. And I did do it from a point of explaining that that's just not how I think this Christmas can go down. And I think you can do the same thing regardless of what's going on. It's about sitting with your children and speaking to them. Children are actually very smart. And I think we just need to give them more credit in terms of just being honest and telling them what's really happening without scaring them, of course, and or ever maligning the other parent.
I love the idea that you're still doing that in your family, even when kids are a little bit older, because just explaining it, everybody knows if you put your cards on the table and say what's going on.
Absolutely. Everything's in how you market it too, right?
So in this season, when we can say, you know, your presence is a present to people, how do we give each other in marriage, you know, a kind thought? You have a chapter on contributing to each other in word, thought, and deed. That sounds like a very generous thought and something that the other will really appreciate. Explain that for us a little bit.
Well, one of the best ways to explain it is I talk about this example where a guy named Dr. Gottman has this book that he wrote about marriage, and he takes these couples and he puts them in a retreat setting right after they get married. So we're in the love stage right then and there. And he watches them with cameras. And he can decide if that couple is after watching them for one weekend, he can decide whether they will still married or get divorced. And he is correct 95% of the time. And it comes down, right, I know. Right. So what he does is he watches them and he gives this example. A man goes up to the window. He's like putting some dishes in the sink in this beautiful retreat spot. And he looks outside the window and he sees a bird. And this man loves birds. He's like, oh my God, it's a beautiful bluebird. His wife is sitting on the couch. She's reading a magazine. And he says, honey, you got to see the bluebird. It's so beautiful. And she's like, yeah, no. I'm reading my magazine. Thanks. And he's like, no, please, you got to see the bluebird and the baby bird. And she's like, no, I'm reading my magazine. You know, leave me alone. He says that couple will be divorced. And the reason they will be divorced is because he says all day long we're giving emotional bids throughout our marriage. That was an emotional bid for the husband to the wife saying, join me in this experience because I love bluebirds. Unfortunately, the wife doesn't like bluebirds. So she said, I'm not accepting the bid. But Gottman's point is that all day long, whether, you know, if I'm tired, again, back to a dishwasher, I must have something about that. But if I'm tired and I'm unloading the dishwasher and my husband notices and he says, honey, you seem tired, let me unload it tonight, right? He's picking up on my emotional bid. And if we have hundreds of those throughout the day, the people that are meeting the bids are the people that will be very successful in marriage. So when you talk about, you know, contributing in thought, word, and deed, that's what we want to do. We want to pick up on the emotional bid from our spouse and notice what's important to them. It really has nothing to do with us. It has to do with what's important to them. But what happens in the course of marriage is people start to go their separate ways. Well, no, you play golf, I don't like golf. Oh, well, you like your girls' night, so fine. You go out all the time with the girls. And then separately, over time, we get further and further and further apart. And again, we do have a divorce rate in this country of 50% and another 25% who stay together unhappily. Those are not great statistics, but we can turn it around by noticing what's important to our spouse.
That is bingo. You hit the nail on the head, because this seems like something we can course correct. If we're in a marriage and we're saying, oh, wait a minute, that's me, I kind of, you know, ignore what he's talking about. Or, hey, she says all the time that she wants to talk about this and I blow it off. Let me pay attention. We can fix this.
Well, not only can you fix it, but again, I go back to, this is a long life if you're lucky enough to live it. And if you're married and you have children, why wouldn't you be intentional about making it the most happy marriage ever? I mean, why would you live at a level 5 when you can live at a level 10? And it's really not that hard to do. It's a matter of going to the kitchen table, saying, come on, let's talk about how we can have the best marriage ever, come up with some ideas, and then put them into place. It's really that simple.
How do we use this emotional bit as well with children? Because we are going to be spending a lot of time together. Older kids are coming back into the house. And of course, we have younger kids at home. We don't want them staring at a screen for several weeks, just trying to bide our time until 2021 and we send them back to school. How can we connect with our kids? It sounds like love languages apply to them too.
Well, love languages do apply to them, but I do coach some kids as well, not young kids, but, high school and up. And the one kids will tell me all the time is the reason they don't speak to their parents is because their parents don't hear them. So they always say to me, well, why would I continue to talk or ever contribute anything? Because no matter what I say, I get blown off. So an example of that would be a kid is in the car with his mom or his dad, and they go, how was your day? And they say, my day was good. Well, how was your test? It was okay. What'd you get on it? I got a C+. And then all of a sudden, the conversation changes. What? You got a C+? What do you mean you got a C+? And then they're not being heard anymore. Conversation over, right? And kids are just like, well, why would I ever share anything again? That could be a completely different conversation if the mom or dad said, oh, that's interesting. You got a C+? Right? Now we're encouraging from the bottom up. We're no longer scolding from the top down. Oh, you got a C+? Well, tell me about that. And then the kid's like, I don't know. I guess I didn't study hard enough. Oh, okay. Well, tell me what was going on last night. Oh, I was watching too much Instagram or TV or whatever it was. All right. So let's brainstorm about how you could get a B next time. And it's a completely different conversation. So again, yes, love languages, and we can go through what those are with kids. But I think the most important thing is hearing what they're saying, not just deciding you're the adult, you're right, and what they say doesn't matter. And I think that's going on in way too many households.
And tell me about, for the divorced couples who are trying to navigate this type of connection, how do we take a step back and say, okay, you're not my favorite person, we're divorced for a reason, but I'm going to try to connect with you just for the sake of what we need to do together, because you're still in each other's lives. So the idea of being separate isn't exactly true. And I know you have a very, a good way of expressing this. So please do it in your own words.
What are we referring to about how to...
That you're still connected just because you're divorced. It's not like the problem is gone. You're still dealing with it, just not as a married couple. No,
absolutely. And when it comes to kids, again, I mean, you just have to look at what the truth is, which is the most important thing is those beautiful children that you brought in the world together. And it's what I said before, like you have to be able to say to each other, we are better than this. We can do this for the sake of these kids. And we can sit down and figure out what's going on with each of our children. And even with the love languages, like kids relate to different things. Some kids want gifts, some kids want time spent. Some kids want affection, other kids need words of affirmation. So again, that's a good starting place for you and your husband, ex-husband, or vice versa, to sit down and decide together, like we have to manage our kids depending on what their needs are. And we have to be in communication. And the one rule, of course, is you never malign the other parent, because even though you might be angry at them, that is your child's mother or father, and they love them more than anything in the world. So that's just it. That has to be a non-negotiable rule for both of you.
We don't want to drag each other through the mud, because in the end, it's going to reflect on us.
Totally. And it's abuse on some level to those poor kids. No kid wants to hear from anybody that the other parent isn't good or isn't, up to the task or whatever it is. They want to hear good things because that's the person they love in the world.
There's a chapter on your book on intimacy, sex, and celebration. And I know you said that, shockingly, sex is not the first thing on men's minds. They want to be appreciated. So what is it in this category that you really want to share with everyone listening?
Well, I'll share two things that maybe a lot of women might not know about, and then I'll talk men too. But men tell me too, and I also just happen to know it, that where they do feel another level of connection is actually during sex, that they feel that that's where they are intimately, emotionally connected. And so a lot of women will say, no, he always is coming for me, and I don't want to have it as much as he And what I think it is it's not so much that men are coming for them, that they're so sexually charged all the time, which they probably are, because our bodies are very different. But that's where men really feel intimacy. They say, when I am making love to my wife, that is where I feel most connected. So I think if women thought about it that way, as opposed to, oh, he just wants to have sex again. No, what he's trying to do is really connect with you. I think that changes the whole vibe, in the bedroom. And the other thing I would say is about celebration. Again, the celebration once a year for the anniversary dinner is just simply not enough. Again, life is short, life is a gift, and we should be celebrating more often. Celebrating in terms of how we speak about our marriage, but also in terms of actually celebrating the marriage. And whether it's a dinner out or a quick overnight to an inn or having a big family dinner where you simply toast each other, I think it's really important to celebrate your marriage, because again, so many people make marriage the end of a joke or something, and it's not. It really is the most important thing. Our whole society is built on family units. And I'm not saying that that's the only thing, of course, if you're divorced and all the rest of it, but we have to celebrate family units.
Tracy, a lot of couples feel best when they're removed from their home because there are no physical triggers of all the things you need to do or the errands. And when you separate from your kids, it allows you to feel a little bit more connected and more intimate. But there are fewer vacations being had, fewer opportunities to run away to an inn or an overnight. Running into New York City for a night away isn't happening as much. So how do we have this connection? Because we're always together. And chances are, the kids go to bed and then we're just exhausted. We don't have that physical separation anymore. So I don't know, give us some words or some advice to sort of keep that flame going when we're constantly with everyone in the house.
I agree. This has been a tough time. Everybody's on top of each other. And that's why that quote about familiarity breeds contempt is so, at the top of everyone's mind. Because when you spend a lot of time together, it's easy to then start nitpicking and focusing on what's wrong. So again, everything goes back to being intentional, managing it as opposed to it managing you. And so even if you, say to your spouse, hey, let's wake up at 6 o'clock, grab a cup of coffee and go down to the beach and watch the sunrise. Little moments, I think, when we can't do anything big right now is what's going to save the day. But again, little moments, you have to plan them and you have to think about them. So maybe tonight everyone turns to their spouse and says, hey, let's try for some little moments. Why don't you take Saturday and I'll take Sunday, and let's just see if we can do something different just to kind of elevate our marriage and put it again in a kind of sacred space. And just do something outside the ordinary, because you're right, we can't get away right now, and that's making all of life seem a little bit like a drag.
And tell me about one thought on this. Women are usually the ones planning these moments. What are the right words that a woman can use to say, that special night out means less when I've had to figure out the babysitter, plan the reservation, do all of the homework with the kids before so we can get out. It seems like a lot of work on our part to actually make it happen. So how do we get a little more buy-in from our husbands to say, listen, you want my time and attention and you want me to feel sexy and fun? That's really hard to do after I put in all of this work. How do we share that responsibility to make the moments happen?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and then we'll get to actual strategy, is that women have to be careful not to criticize what the men do, because a lot of men will tell me, I did plan that special surprise, and then we got to the restaurant, she's my favorite restaurant, are we Italian, I love Spanish, whatever. So, and then men are very sensitive to rejection. And again, this is not everybody, so I want to be careful what I say, because not every man is sensitive to rejection, but across the board, a lot of them are. And so if we have a history of complaining when they do make the effort, men register that like, well, I don't know that I want to go back in again for another round of rejection. So they really will back off. So we want to be careful about that. But in terms of explaining that, I think you're exactly right. Yes, when we've done all that work, and a lot of women will say that the sexiest thing is when he does the dishes or when I come home to a clean living room or whatever. Again, it goes back to teaching. You teach people how to treat you, what's right. So there's nothing wrong with sitting down with your husband and saying, the sexiest thing you can do for me is, vacuum the living room floor, and, and then maybe we'll have some more fun in the bedroom.
I love that. Just be honest about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I was really, I had all these alarms going off in my mind when I read the chapter about revering conflict.
Mm.
Because I think we sort of tend to sweep things under the rug. We don't want conflict. We push it away. But you're saying embrace it because it's an opportunity for us to be our best version. So explain that, because I thought that was a beautiful way to really bring conflict to the forefront instead of hiding it.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite ideas in the whole world, which is you can look at conflict as I'm going in for the fight and here we are, we're fighting, we're fighting, we're fighting. Or you can change it around and really make conflict a portal for personal evolution. And this actually did change my marriage. In the early days, I was all up for, I'm going to prove that I'm right no matter what argument we're having. And it just doesn't serve. Like I said, once you're right, you make the other person wrong and vice versa, relationship over. And so what I started to do is, and I'm not perfect at it, believe me, but when I am in conflict with my husband about anything, if we have a disagreement, I'm always trying to think now, how am I showing up? Even in the midst of conflict, can I be gracious? Can I be patient? Can I be kind? And if I'm working on that, then I'm not trying to win anymore. I'm just trying to show up as my best self. And also the other thing I say a lot is, don't always look at a second opinion as something horrible. Instead, be interested in it. It's interesting that we married someone who thinks differently than us. And so sort of be fascinated by that and curious about that and say, well, why do you think we should spend all our money on going on a vacation as opposed to, a private school education, if that would be an example? And be curious as opposed to just going right in for I'm right, you're wrong, and all of that. So 2 things, be curious about the other person's opinion, and then always look for, in the midst of conflict, how you can be the better person. Because again, our spouse can bring out in us things we really need to work on. And that's a good thing, because that's what this whole journey is about evolution.
The triggers show us exactly what we're lacking as well.
Exactly.
So when it comes to this, fair fighting, do we fight in front of our kids? Do we wait till later? Do we fight and then go talk about it alone and then come back and say, hey, we've resolved this, so that we show them that couples do argue, but it's coming to the resolution that matters? What is the best way to handle our stuff and involve our children to the right level?
So you said it perfectly. I think the first thing is just make a non-negotiable agreement with your spouse. You never argue in front of your kids. That's step 1. And then we'll get to, if you happen to, then we can figure that out. And the reason you do that is because I don't care what age they are. I don't care if they are just born or whether they're 4 or whether they're 18. No child wants to hear their parents tearing each other apart. It feels scary. It feels maybe I caused it. I mean, you ask kids, they'll tell you what they think about their parents fighting. And they always say, 1, I think it's my fault that they're fighting. And 2, I have no power to do anything about it. So that makes me feel even more scared. I'm just a victim here listening to it. And it feels horrible and it feels scary. So make your first decision that you will never do it. Like if you have to look at each other and point to the garage and you both go running out there and fight out there or in your car or something, that's what you need to do. Second scenario, too late. You couldn't control yourself. You're too angry and now you fought in front of your kids. Yeah, I think bringing the kids in afterwards and saying, listen, just like you fight with your brother, mommy and daddy fight. It's not the end of the world. We had a disagreement. People disagree all the time and we have resolved it. And also I think an apology goes a long way with kids. I'm sorry that you had to see that. We really are working, all of us as a family unit love each other and we need to work better, blah, blah, blah. I think that works every time.
What are some of the ground rules we can tell our kids about fighting? Because in the shared space that we're going to have, I know ground rules are different. Kids go away to college, they're individuals, we sent them off, they're on their own, and then they come back into the house. How are they supposed to live? Are they kids again? Are they adults? What is the happy medium for transitioning back to the family of origin?
Well, again, I do think it's about age because, yes, at a certain age, they are adults themselves. So you have to and there's maturity levels and everything. So you as the parent have to decide that. But I would say, I think family meetings are always good. Again, just like the meeting with your spouse, you can have a meeting where you all sit down and say, okay, everybody's home again. How are we going to operate so that all the chores get done, we have peace. And again, you just set some ground rules and some rules that everyone can follow. Clarity equals confidence. When people are clear, they're then confident about how they have to behave. If there is no clarity, then people do whatever they do. So sitting down and again, get everybody to weigh in, to buy in. Meaning, if you don't ask their opinion, just tell them how it's going to be, the likelihood of being successful is about 0. But if you ask kids, like, what are you willing to do? What chore will you take up? Can we all agree we won't yell? Once they weigh in about that, they will most likely buy in about it. And then you will have success for sure.
So if we're looking for clarity here, as you mentioned, let's talk about, your chapter 8, teen parent. How can parents sort of get on the same page, the same wavelength before others come in? Because, for example, as parents, we might have a different idea of safety in COVID, and our kids come home and think something else. So how do we get ourselves on the same page before anybody else enters the picture?
Well, again, I mean, age 18, if that's what we're talking about, when they come home, I mean, it's still your home, and you as the parent still have to make the rules, even if you have an adult child coming into the house. I just think how you market it to them and how you discuss it is different. And again, if you treat an 18-year-old like they're an adult, that probably is going to serve you better than, again, telling them, well, you're back in my home and you're going to listen to my rules. I don't think that goes over very well, right? We want to make everyone, again, when there's ownership, people take better care of things, right? We know that. And so if they have some ownership around it, like, listen, mom and dad are nervous about COVID. We're nervous about you going out to some college parties and then coming home. So what can we all agree on so that you can still have a social life, but we can feel safe? I think brainstorming is the name of the game, as opposed to simply telling your kids how it's going to be. It never works to tell your kids how it's going to be.
Forgive and forget. Is that possible? Do we need both in a marriage? And then we'll talk about the co-parenting after that.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a great quote about a great marriage is the union of two great forgivers. I mean, there's a lot of betrayals in marriage, from little stuff like you said you would do something and you didn't, to big stuff like you gambled all our money away, or you slept with the secretary, or you drink too much, or whatever. I mean, there's a million things that, we can hold each other accountable for. And so I think if you want to have a long-term successful marriage, you better get very excellent at being a forgiver. And the only way to truly forgive is you have to forget. You can't say, I'm going to forgive, but then hold all the crimes over here and keep bringing them out. So you can't say to somebody, well, I forgive you, but then in the next argument, you go right back to it again. So there has to be humility in forgiveness, and you have to really be willing to put it away. And, forgiveness is not an easy thing, especially if the betrayal continues to happen. But forgiveness is not a feeling, it's an action. So, you do it regardless of how you feel, because it's the right thing to do for your marriage, if that makes sense.
If you can give a little bit of support to someone who has an ex and they are just still grappling with a lot of issues, how is it possible to move forward? Because, all right, maybe I can't totally forget, but how can I get to a place of moving forward without all of that baggage still on me?
Great question. And again, I'll give 2 answers, and the first one no one's going to like, so I'll put that out there. But I do think you have to take accountability yourself for the fact that you married somebody who ended up being, your enemy, or someone you don't trust anymore. What were you not seeing at the time? Because you did marry this person, and I always say a lot, it's not like they were so wonderful and then they just became this other thing. Maybe they were always that person and you just didn't have the ability to see it. So maybe take a little accountability, because you can learn from it and then not make the same mistake again. So not in a harsh way, but just in a reflective way, like, what did I miss? Or how am I accountable for this relationship, or all of that stuff? That would be number 1. And then number 2, I think it does go back to forgiveness, because we're all broken people. And maybe you're looking at the ex as a lot more broken because they have all these crimes that they've committed against you, or betrayals. But I think forgiveness, once you can take that high road, I think it's just a lot easier to move on, as opposed to feeling like a victim of all the stuff they did, a victim of the betrayal. And then you always feel terrible, because victims have no power ultimately. So if you can rise above and say, I'm going to forgive that person, I'm going to let it lay, and I'm going to try and get on with my life, because I'm not going to be carrying that anymore. And then that's going to open up all these new and beautiful doors for the future, which is the most important thing.
I want to touch on what you said about moving on, because in the divorced couples, there's a question here. Someone says, what happens when your ex brings women into your old home without talking to you and involving your children? So how do we reintroduce others into the picture?
Yeah, that is really painful, and I can feel the pain even in the question, of course. And so that feels horrible, and that's a true betrayal. And again, but what are you going to do in that situation when somebody does something that is so painful, and you have no power to do anything about it? The only thing you have power then, because you can't change the other person and you can't monitor and manage what they're up to all the time, the only thing you can manage is yourself. And so maybe you're just going to have to decide that no matter how badly that person behaves over there, I still am going to have to take the high road and focus on whatever positive things I can bring into this. And there is a karmic piece of this, which is as you decide to be a better person in light of betrayal, I do think things come around to really serve you in other ways that aren't expected and can really be, quite miraculous in your future.
Tracy, I want to end with some of your thoughts on saving a troubled marriage, because I know you feel very strongly in the ability for couples and in your expertise to turn things around. So speak directly, if you would, please, to the people who are in such a tough spot and think they have no way out, but you have a solution for them.
Well, I want to say two things. Statistics prove that this is a huge statistic, 90% of couples who hit a very serious trouble spot but stayed and did the work, when they go back and interview them 10 years later, all of them are happily married. And these were people, serious trouble spots, had hired attorneys, couldn't stand each other, somebody had moved out, somebody else had met somebody else, all of those horrible, deep things. But they stayed and they decided to turn back towards each other and really do the work. Statistically, when they go back and interview those people are happy again and they feel back in love. So we know that it can work. That's number one. And number two, yes, I feel very strongly that people don't give themselves enough credit for the power they have. You literally, if you can get buy-in from both spouses, no matter how bad it is, you are clever enough and smart enough and have the power to get down and do the work. But the thing is, you have to be willing to stay. And that is why I do love, the marriage vow, which is all about in sickness and in health, for better, for worse. And we say those very quickly when we get married, like, yeah, I just kind of want to get to the reception. But if you really look at those words, they're meaningful. Which is, wow, it could get worse. And not just worse for a month. It could get worse for a year. It could get worse for 5 years. Am I going to stay and be committed to this marriage because I see it as something important and sacred, and not just bail out the first time something goes wrong? So I would say stay the course. And if you don't have the ability to do it on your own, you need to look for help. I happen to be very gifted at it, but there's a lot of good gifted practitioners. And I do think you need to reach out and get the support that you need and that, you certainly deserve.
And you work very quickly, Tracy. I think that when you say gifted, that certainly is one of your gifts. When you talk about sessions, you get a lot done very quickly.
Well, I have, with individuals, I have an 8-week program, and with married couples, I do a 12-week program. And it's not even really 12 weeks. It's even shorter than that. It's just set up so that we spread it out. But, and I do some sessions together and some apart, but my whole thing is about behaving your way to success. You cannot talk your way to success. So I am always giving couples homework and things to work on based on what they really need to have insights about. Because a lot of this is about what do I need to learn and grow from? Because when when you come into a marriage, like I said at the beginning, it is a portal for evolution, both in terms of the marriage, but in terms of yourself. And the reason I like to do it quickly is because, again, I go back to that life is very short, and this is a very important thing. Family units are extremely important, and we don't want our kids to suffer, and we want to be happy. And so just do the work. Do not give up. Do the work, and it will serve you for sure.
And Tracy, lastly, tell us where we can find you on Instagram. Again, your podcast. Tell us the best places to connect with you.
So the best place is to go to my website because everything's there, and it's tracyfox.net. Like, a big net, like we're catching things, not .com. And on there, you can see all the books. I really do suggest, these books are fun. I don't know if anyone can see it, but the Happy Marriage Handbook, I have one for the wife and one for the husband, and you do it. It's fun. You go through the 10-step solution together. And even if your marriage isn't in trouble, this is a great way to really get to know each other because you answer all these questions and then you come together. I also set it up as a video course, so if you don't like writing and reading, you can just do the video course. But everything's there, and then of course you can like me on Facebook and Instagram and all those different social media. And then please listen to my podcast because I talk regularly about all these subjects. I did a whole one on happy marriage, and what's interesting, I just went back and looked, that is actually the #1 downloaded podcast was the Happy Marriage Podcast. And I talk a lot of different subjects, but that just shows how many people really are in need of great advice around marriage. So,
well, this is your last chance to put anything in the chat box. And Tracy, one last question. For the holidays that bring up some unhappy memories, what is the best way that we can say, I'm turning this around? I can't change my childhood. I can't undo anything that's been done. How do we switch our brains to create new things for the future?
Well, I do think tying it to a ritual is always good. So maybe you have a idea that you're going to write down all the things that you want to kind of let go of for 2020. And I think that for us, for all of us, there's going to be a lot on that list. And then maybe go outside and have a bonfire in the backyard and everybody toss their, lists in there. Or have a special dinner where you break out the champagne and you each toast to some new idea you're going to install. I think tying it to a ritual makes it real as opposed to just thinking about it. So yes, 'tis the season. So why not do something around the Christmas tree or a fancy dinner or in the backyard, just something fun to sort of say goodbye to the past, especially with 2020, and hello to the new year, and especially around the Christmas season, which is all about love and forgiveness, right?
Tracy, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you again. Elaine?
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. One other question, just back to the family meetings. Do you feel that people should get there, because now kids are coming home, it's a 2.5-week break for many, and so forth. It's the middle of winter. There's nothing, there's no going out to the beach or any of that fun stuff. I know there's, paddle and all sorts of things, but what do you suggest just for people to get on the same page with their kids, no matter what age they are, on, what are we going to do for the next 2.5 weeks?
Great. I love that question. Thank you. And again, I think that you put that question out there. You get around the table and you put in the middle of the table the question, which is, how can we all really get along at the highest level for the next 2.5 weeks? And who has amazing suggestions for things we can do so we're all not just sitting here watching TV? And then be quiet after that. And then everybody thinks, and then everybody puts their suggestion out. So whether the 4-year-old is saying, I think we should play Legos, and the 18-year-old is saying, I think you should let me have a party, it doesn't matter, but you let everybody put their ideas out there, and then you look for common ground and focus on solutions. What happens in so many families is we only focus on the problems. Well, you're loud. Well, you play too much music. Well, you're a brat, blah, blah, blah. Do not focus on the problems. You are able, especially as the parent, right, to shift what we're going to think about. So think about what are the solutions for having a happy time. And if you actually are quiet and you give your children a minute, they will come up with the amazing ideas and you won't even have to.
That's true.
Good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great answer. We're all going to be trying that. Well, Tracy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Demetra.
Both on your podcast and on your website. Happy holidays. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Bye.